أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير، الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور، الذي خلق 7 سماوات طباقا ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت فارجع البصر هل ترى من فطور ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير، ولقد زينا السماء الدنيا بمصابيح وجعلناها رجوما للشياطين وأعتدنا لهم عذاب السعير، وللذين كفروا بربهم عذاب جهنم وبئس المصير. صدق الله العلي العظيم. الفاتحة مسبوقة بالصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.
बार दिगर सलावत। हुसैन जब के चले बादे दोपहर हुसैन जब के चले बादे दोपहर को न था कोई के जो था रकाबे तो सन को सकीना थाम रही थी अबा के दामन को हुसैन وقت سوار کیا تھا بہن نے بھائی کو، حسین جب کہ صلوات بار دیگر صلوات. یا جب ہم کو شہیدان وفا آتے ہیں، دل میں ایک محشر خاموش اٹھا جاتے ہیں، بے سبب گری آئے پہ ہم نہیں دنیا کربلا والے مسافر ہمیں یاد آتے ہیں، رونے والے غم شبیر میں جی کھول کے رو، یہ وہ آنسو ہیں قیامت میں جو کام آتے ہیں، دے کے مشکیزہ سکینہ نے یہ بچوں سے کہا، پانی دریا سے چچا جا کے ابھی لاتے ہیں، اس طرح جاتے ہیں عباس سوئے نہر فرات، لشکر شر یہ سمجھتا ہے علی آتے ہیں، سب کو ملتا ہے در آل پیمبر سے نہال، ہم مگر اپنی تمنا سے سوا پاتے ہیں، یا جب ہم کو شہیدان وفا آتے ہیں، دل میں ایک محشر خاموش اٹھا جاتے ہیں. صلوات.
صلوات.
تھا یہ بانوں کا بیان، کس کو دوں اب لوریاں، ڈھونڈتی پھرتی ہے مادر، ہے میرا اصغر کہاں، تیرا جھولا جل گیا اے میرے تشنا دہاں، ڈھونڈتی پھرتی ہے مادر، ہے میرا اصغر کہاں، ہائے وہ نازک گلا 3 دن سے خشک تھا، بڑھ کے موجے تیر نے وہ کس قدر زخمی کیا، تر ہوئی خون سے زبان، لے سکے نہ ہچکیاں، ڈھونڈتی پھرتی ہے مادر، ہے میرا اصغر کہاں، خون بھرا کرتا تیرا، ہائے I would request our honored guest, Maulana Chandoo, please. Salawat.
سورة المباركة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على الأشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، خاتم النبيين، سيدنا وحبيبنا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد صلوات. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتاب المجيد والفرقان الحميد: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. I begin in the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. All praises to Allah, Lord of the world, the sustainer of the universe. He who existed before bringing everything else into existence, and him whom shall remain after everything else has perished. May his choicest blessings, mercy and salutations be upon the last of his messengers, the best of his creation, the mercy unto the worlds, Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi wa sallam. And may he extend his blessings, mercy and salutations upon the pure and immaculate family of our beloved Prophet, his Ahl al-Bayt, about which the Holy Prophet has said, "My Ahl al-Bayt are like the Ark of Noah. Whomsoever sets sail with them is indeed saved, and whomsoever remains behind shall perish." And on these sacred but tragic nights of the holy month of Muharram, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to explicitly and specifically send his blessings, mercy and salutations upon the pure and immaculate grandson of our beloved Prophet, about which the Holy Prophet has said, etched on the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the words, "Inna al-Husayn misbahul huda wa safinat al-najah." Hussein alayhi salam is the lantern of guidance and the ship of salvation. Assalamu ala al-Husayn wa ala Ali ibn al-Husayn wa ala awlad al-Husayn wa ala ashab al-Husayn. Mu'mineen azamallahu jurakum bi musamina bil Husayn alayhi salam. Tonight is the eve of Ashura. It feels like all hope has been lost. Each and every single one of Imam al-Husayn's peace proposals to Umar ibn Saad has been turned down, except one. Umar ibn Saad wanted to start the battle on the 9th of Muharram, but Imam al-Husayn requested one more night of ibadah, one more night of worship. This is that night, the eve of Ashura. Tomorrow, all the men will be lost. The women and children will become captive and prisoner. Yazid will get the victory that he wanted. Since the beginning of time, mankind has been looking for ways to overcome loss, to overcome failure and fear. Today, $1 trillion insurance industry exists just to help us deal with the loss of lives and property. Modern society has a very different definition of loss to what Islam teaches about what loss and failure is. Today, when we lose money, we lose assets, when we lose property, when the stock market drops, when our share prices drop, we feel like we are in loss. Or when we lose health or lose a loved one, that's when we feel that we are in loss. It creates stress, anxiety, gives us many kinds of mental illnesses, and can put us into depression. But how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala define loss and failure in Islam? What is the definition of loss according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Over the last few nights, we have been looking at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's template for success. That He has given us a template which we can follow to achieve success. But in the glorious Quran, is there also a template that leads to failure? A template that we can call the template of the losers. And what can we learn from this template of failure or the template of losers to achieve success in this world? And inshallah, this will be our subject this evening, my last majalis. I want to introduce the subject of loss and failure, and what is true loss and failure in Islam. And we will discuss this in the following ways. What is Islam's definition of loss, and who are the true losers? In what surah does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provide us with the loser's template? And what can we learn from this template about how to achieve the greatest success? And lastly, how did Imam al-Hussein turn a colossal loss in Karbala into the greatest success ever? Inshallah, we shall start this after the loudest of your salawats. Allahu Akbar. Allah. One of the most profound lines on the subject of loss was given to us by none other than Sayyid al-Shuhada himself. When he said in Dua Arafah, what has he gained who has lost you, O Allah? And what has he lost who has gained you, Allah? And no one demonstrated this more than Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam himself. Because in the space of a few hours on the day of Ashura, he sacrificed everything he had for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he gained a closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a station and a status with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that nobody else has achieved. Even our beloved Prophet has famously said, Husseinu minni wa ana minal Hussein. Hussein is from me and I am from Hussein. Now we all understand when the Prophet said, Hussein is from me, because Hussein was the grandson, the biological grandson of our beloved Prophet. He referred to Hassan and Hussein as his own sons. But what did he mean when he said, I am from Hussein? The Prophet was telling us that his teachings, his message, the religion that he brought, the verses of the Quran that were revealed to him, all of this survived after him because of the sacrifice of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Not only did Imam al-Hussein sacrifice, save the teachings of our beloved Prophet, but teachings of all the 124,000 prophets that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent for mankind. And that is why we have a tradition in Qamatul Ziyarat, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that every Thursday night, 124,000 of his prophets descend to Karbala just to recite As-salamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Because he saved all the religions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought for mankind. Imam al-Hussein may have lost the battle in Karbala. It was a colossal loss because the reflections and the resemblance and the grandchildren of Rasulullah were lost on that day. But he won the war. An eternal battle. A victory like no other victory that today billions of people, over 1400 years, have been rescued and saved and are safely on Sirat al-Mustaqim because of the sacrifice of Imam al-Hussein. Islam sees loss and failure very differently to the modern world. Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he was telling his sons, Hassan Hussein, he was telling them, oh my sons, poverty is indeed a great and horrible misfortune, a great calamity. But worse than poverty is ill health. And worse than ill health is sickness of the inner heart. And then he said, indeed, a great ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is wealth. Wealth is a great bounty from Allah. But better than wealth is health. And even better than health is taqwat al-qulub, piety of the hearts. In Islam, success is judged by the condition of a human being's inner heart. What state is a human being and a believer's inner heart? This is what determines success or failure. Wealth is not success and poverty is not failure. Health is not success and illness is not failure. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is concerned with the state of people's inner hearts. And that is why when you look at the template which we examined of Surah Al-Fatiha over the last 3 nights, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us 3 outcomes for 3 groups of people. These 3 groups of people, in reality, these outcomes reflect 3 conditions of the heart. One group had belief, the an'amta alayhim, the muttaqeen or the muflihun, they had belief. The other group, the ghayrul maqdubi, the ones who rejected Sirat al-Mustaqim, they had a state of disbelief. And the walad dhaleen, the hypocrites, those who've gone astray, they had a sickness in the heart. These 3 groups of people in reality reflect 3 different states of a human being's heart. And that is why in the glorious Quran we have many verses, like the one in Surah Al-Shams, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. He indeed was successful who purifies himself, and he who fails, who corrupts his soul. In Islam, it is the state of this inner heart which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is interested in. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. One of the most profound surahs in the glorious Quran, and also one of the shortest surahs in the glorious Quran, can be termed the template of losers, the template of failure. But in this surah, it teaches us the most powerful lessons of how we can be successful. Our scholars have said that after Surah Al-Fatiha, if Allah only revealed this one surah, then it would be enough instruction for mankind to achieve success. It contains only 3 verses, a surah that each and every one in this room knows by heart. And this is none other than Surah Al-Asr, surah number 103 of the glorious Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts with a very profound statement. He says, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. I swear by time, surely man is at a loss. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making a grand statement. He's saying that I swear by time that each and every single one of you are in loss. And he used the word khusr, which comes from the word khasara, which means to be in loss. The losers are described in the glorious Quran as the khasireen. But why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us all that we are at loss? And if we reflect upon it, if we measure ourselves against time, then indeed mankind is at a loss. Today this planet is littered with grand monuments that are now derelict and abandoned, that once upon one of time used to be lived in by great kings. If we measure ourselves by time, then truly we are at a loss. Yesterday we were children, today we have children. Yesterday we were parents, today we have become grandparents, and tomorrow all of us will be gone. All that will remain is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But asr also has another meaning. In the Arabic language it means squeezing. Just as we were squeezed out of our mother's wombs when we were born, when we leave this world, our souls will be squeezed out of our bodies. Every human being will experience this squeezing. And this world, time is squeezing us out of this dunya, out of this world and into the next world. We are like this ice cellar whose capital each and every day is melting as every day goes by. Time is the most valuable commodity that you and I have been given. But the tragedy today is that we are more concerned with our watches than the time that it tells. Today, the richest people in this room are our youth because they have the greatest amount of time in front of them. But just before we lose all hope, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us a very important message. He tells us we are all at loss when it comes to time, but then He tells us something. He gives us a formula or a template which we can apply, in which we can safeguard ourselves from the destruction of time. He says, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Except those who believe and do good deeds and enjoin upon each other the truth and enjoin upon each other patience. But why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention these 4 virtues? We've all read this surah many times. Why has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala selected these 4 virtues to mention in this surah of loss? Because if we think about it, these 4 virtues are not destroyed by time. They survive the destruction of time. They are eternal and timeless. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us every single thing will be destroyed by time, except those who acquire these 4 virtues. They are eternal and timeless. Those who imbibe these virtues within them, their deeds, their nafs survives the destruction of time. And inshallah tonight I want to show how these 4 deeds in particular can help us survive the destruction of time and allow us to be successful in the dunya and the akhirah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, invest your time not in what will be destroyed, not what will perish, but what will survive the destruction of time. Your most valuable commodity, invest it well, because you have a limited amount of time in this world. And the first virtue he mentions is Iman. Iman, if we think about it, is not something that resides in our physical heart. It's not something material that can be destroyed by time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us it's this Iman that He will measure and weigh and inspect on the day of judgment. It survives the destruction of time. This nafs of ours, the reason the Quran places so much emphasis on it, because it's a vault, a safe, a safety deposit box in which we lock up and safeguard the Iman that we acquire in this world. Shaitan wants nothing more than to rob us of this Iman. You see, Iman is not lost with time. Iman is lost with disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Iman is lost when we commit sins in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we accept Iblis's invitation and we come off Sirat al-Mustaqim, this is what causes a destruction of Iman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, turn these inner hearts of yours into safety deposit boxes, into vaults, into safes. Safeguard that Iman, because it will travel with you and be inspected before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He famously tells us, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهُ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. On the day of judgment, your children or your wealth will be of no use to you, except the one who comes before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with this qalbin salim, this pure and immaculate heart filled with Iman. Let us make our hearts the fortresses of Iman. The purpose of a fortress is to protect what is inside it. Let us make it a fortress and not allow Iblis to enter our hearts. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The second virtue that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-Asr that survives the destruction of time is our amal salih, our good deeds. And we all know, we've heard so many hadiths, that these good deeds that we do for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are not lost. They don't go to waste. We will find them on the day of judgment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will place them on the mizan. They will be weighed, and then He will reward us with the value of those good deeds that we done. In a form of a currency, they will take a beautiful shape. And sometimes when I'm asked, how is it that we do good deeds in this world and we are rewarded in paradise? And the best analogy I can share with you is that we all in this world collect club card points or air miles. We all use our cards to accumulate miles when we spend in this world. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us in the same way, the good deeds you do for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we accumulate Jannah points. Not only do we get this reward not in the world, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to redeem those points in the akhirah. When the deeds are done, qurbatan illallah, fi sabilillah, then when those points are accumulated. Otherwise, we only get the reward in this world. And that is why you notice in the glorious Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whenever He uses the word إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, He follows with the Amilus Salihat. First He asks us to acquire faith and Iman, and then He always mentions good deeds, and never the other way around. First Iman, and then good deeds. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when you are a believer, that is only when the deeds that you do in this world will have a double value, that you are rewarded for them in this world and you are able to cash them in or redeem them in the hereafter. This is how our deeds survive the destruction of time. And then the third virtue that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ, and those who enjoin upon each other the truth. Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasize here the truth? You see, that truth is something that we can conceal, we can hide, we can abuse, we can bend, but we can never destroy it. And if we search hard enough, we will always find the truth. The truth is something that is immortal, it is eternal, it exists forever. Truth is something that you cannot kill, you cannot destroy. The truth that existed at the time of Adam is the truth that exists until today. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you and I, make yourselves one with the truth. Because if you make yourself one with the truth, then just as the truth survives the destruction of time, then this nafs of this soul of yours will also survive the destruction of time. It is how our nafs remains pure and journeys back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once somebody came to the Holy Prophet and he began to flatter the Holy Prophet, and the Holy Prophet was Tabib al-Nufusina, he was a doctor of the hearts. He could see the illness in people's hearts. He could see who was true and who was a liar. And he said to the man, what will happen to you on the day of judgment when you cannot remember even my name? Or what will happen to you in the graves when Munkar and Nakir question you and they ask you who was your prophet and you won't be able to even answer? And so the man said to him, but I know your name, I know your father's name, I know your grandfather. He started to mention all the lineage of our Holy Prophet. And the Holy Prophet said, no, you see, whatever knowledge you have in this world that stays in your mind will be destructed, it will disappear, it will go in the grave. It is only that knowledge that you imbibe within your inner heart, that truth that you make with part of yourself, it is that truth that will survive. It is that truth that will answer in the grave. It is that truth that will speak on the day of judgment. The truth that we made part of ourselves. And then the final quality which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, which survives the destruction of time, is sabr. He ends with وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Sabr is that resistance that we show on this path to perfection, as we try and get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our Imams and our Prophet said is the most valuable and most powerful virtue that is responsible for the success of all of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's religions. Sabr is not limited by time and space. You see, strength requires muscles. Muscles required food. But sabr is that virtue of the inner heart, the strength and the muscle of our nafs. There is no limit to the amount of strength our nafs can have. It is measured through patience and sabr. And yet today we are all busy in the gyms working on our bodies, building our muscles, toning our bodies. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the believer that the most important virtue by which you can survive all the trials and tribulations of this world, the way in which you can accumulate iman, the way in which you can accumulate good deeds, the way in which you stand up for haqq, is through the virtue of sabr. It is sabr that will help you with all these three other virtues that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us about. And that is why He has given us the month of Ramadan, that boot camp, that gymnasium in which the believer builds up his sabr and works on his sabr. Fasting is a way in which we acquire Allah, we acquire sabr and get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is why we find on the day of Ashura, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, many of his companions were over 60 years old. They were not there because of their strength. They were there because of the sabr and the taqwa that they displayed. That was their virtue that shone on the day of Ashura. That is how they stood bravely in front of the enemy soldier. That is how truth represented itself against falsehood. You see, Imam al-Hussein's victory that we talk about, he suffered a huge colossal loss on the day of Ashura. But how did it turn into the greatest victory of all? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us these 4 principles that are not destroyed by time. Today, when we look at the sacrifice of Imam al-Hussein, we look at the commemorations of Imam al-Hussein. It is the largest gathering of people anywhere in the world who come and honor and commemorate him during these days of Ashura and Arba'in. Millions of people gather in Karbala, in centers all around the world. When we listen to his musibah, the wound is fresh in our hearts. It feels like his musibah only took place yesterday. It feels like we have lost a family member. We weep and cry for him and his family more than we cry for our own family members that have departed. But why is this? What took place in Karbala that Imam al-Hussein achieved such a great status? You see, if we think about it, Karbala, was it not a battle between belief and disbelief? Good and evil, truth and falsehood, patience and impatience. These 4 virtues that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-Asr, Imam al-Hussein displayed them in the greatest way, such that they survived the destruction of time. That event that took place in Ashura was immortalized forever because Imam al-Hussein associated himself and his companions with those 4 virtues, those 4 qualities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that are not destroyed by time. And that is how today that he is remembered in such a way. Because if we want to see belief, we see Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. If we want to see acts of goodness, we look at Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. If we want to see truth against falsehood, we look at Karbala, we see the highest form of truth. And if we want to see sabr in its highest form, we look at Karbala, where patience stood against impatience. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Asr is giving us a very important message. That if we don't want to be amongst the losers, if we don't want to be amongst the failures, then in this world, let us invest our time, our most precious commodity, in these 4 qualities and attributes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This is my last majalis in this series, this Muharram, where we're reflecting on the qualities that make us amongst the muflihun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the glorious Quran mentions this phrase, Ulaika humul muflihun, many times, where he describes the qualities and the virtues and the characteristics of those who are successful. I have tried over the last 8 nights to present to you some of these verses, some of the concepts where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala seeks to guide us and how we can achieve success in this world and the akhirah. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts our effort. I also wanted to take this opportunity to thank Hajj Basim and Hajj Tehseen and all of you for your hospitality and your kindness during my stay over here. I felt very loved and very welcome. And I pray inshallah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts all our khidmat, all our sacrifice, all our service, because indeed the majlis of Imam al-Hussein takes a lot of work, and I've seen so many of you work tirelessly and hard, come before the majalis and stay after the program just to ensure that this majalis goes on. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all our efforts in this time, and may He bless all of you and your families. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Historians say that they have never seen a night like the night of Ashura, the eve of Ashura. They say there was such a nur and an aura that was coming from the camp of Imam al-Hussein, as if the angels were descending to earth that night. The historians could hear the sounds of prayer coming from the camp of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Mothers were spending their last moments with their sons. Imam al-Hussein was praying for his companions and showing them their places in Jannah. But equally, Umar ibn Saad was busy that night. Muslim ibn Hamid, one of the historians in Karbala, says, we could hear the drum beats of war. Umar ibn Saad's army were sharpening their swords, preparing their battle plan, checking their inventory. But there was one commander on Umar ibn Saad's army that night who was restless and couldn't sleep. He was looking over at the camp of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and he could hear the cries of al-Attash from the women and children. These were the granddaughters of Rasulullah that were crying. He could hear the sounds of prayer. Hur ibn Yazid ibn Riyai was now in deep reflection and contemplation. He was one of Imam al-Hussein's companions on the eve of Ashura, who was making up his mind on which side did he want to be when the battle begins tomorrow on the day of Ashura. After midnight, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he gathers all his companions in his tent. He tells them that these people, the enemy, are after my blood. They will not spare me whether you live or die. So take the darkness of the night and escape from here. I absolve you from your pledge of allegiance to me. But nobody left Imam al-Hussein that night. So then he says to them, maybe some of you are ashamed to go while others are watching. So he asked one of his companions to switch off the lamps and turn down the lamps. And he said, take the darkness now and leave the room. But after some time, when he switched on the lamps, he saw that all his companions were present exactly where he left them. And then one by one, starting with Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, Ali Akbar, Habib ibn Mazai, one by one they again came to pledge their allegiance to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam that night. I want to read you some of the words of one of Imam's companions by the name of Sa'id bin Abdullah al-Hanafi. He says, by God, if I knew I was killed and then brought back to life and then burned and then scattered across the desert, and if this was repeated 70 times, I would never abandon you, O Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. How could I not sacrifice my life for you when I know that there is only one chance at death in this world? One death with honor that can be achieved, and I cannot waste it or cast that opportunity aside. All Imam's companions came and pledged allegiance that night. But in the tents of the ladies, whilst all the men, the family members were listening and pledging their allegiance, in the tents of the ladies, there was a 6-month-old infant. There was a 6-month-old infant who was also listening to what was going on. He was also whispering his pledge of allegiance to Abu Abdullah Hussein. He was telling Imam, I am also ready to sacrifice my life for you. Tonight, we remember that 6-month-old Aliun Askar, the youngest son of Imam al-Hussein in Karbala, the infant son of Rubab. On the eve of Ashura, all the mothers were with their children, spending their last moments proudly preparing them for battle. But there was one mother who was crying on that night. Do you know why she was crying? She was telling her husband, Imam al-Hussein, I have no sacrifice to give tomorrow. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the glorious Quran, وَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ فَبِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ. He said that what the young infant will say on the day of it will say on the day of judgment, for what sin was I killed? Just before Ashura, Imam al-Hussein now feels that he is all alone. Abul Fadl al-Abbas, sacrifice has been given. Hamid ibn Muslim writes, we heard Imam al-Hussein call out from the top of his voice, Hal min nasirin yansuruna. Is there anyone to help us? The historians were saying, we thought, who is left? There are no companions left to now come and help Imam al-Hussein. And then all of a sudden they say, we could hear the sound, the loud cries of this young infant coming from the tent of the ladies. It is as if Imam al-Hussein remembered now that there was one more sacrifice to give. He went towards Rubab. Rubab said to him, "Oh Imam, when you called for help, Aliyun Askar, he woke up from his sleep. He began to cry. He wanted to climb out from his cot. Oh Imam, before you go to the battlefield for the last time, before you go and give your sacrifice, take this young infant son of mine. It has been 3 days since he has tasted water. I have no more milk to give him. Maybe the enemy soldiers will be compassionate. Maybe they will give him water." Imam al-Hussein remained silent. He began to pick up Aliyun Askar. He whispered something into the ears of Aliyun Askar. Aliyun Askar stopped crying. Ruba said, "Oh Imam, have you promised him water? Have you told him you're getting water? Is that why he has stopped crying?" Imam al-Hussein wrapped up Aliyun Askar in a white cloth and then took Aliyun Askar towards the enemy soldiers. Hamid ibn Muslim writes, all of a sudden we saw Imam al-Hussein emerged from the tent. He was holding something in his arms. We don't know what he was holding. We have all been to Karbala. You know where Maqam Aliyun Askar is. You know where the Khaymega is. Imam al-Hussein took Aliyun Askar and he walked from the tent all the way to the camp of Umar ibn Saad. He walked towards the camp of Umar ibn Saad. They were wondering, what is in Imam al-Hussein's hand? Is it a peace offering? Is it a white flag of surrender? And then when he came before the enemy soldiers, he took out his 6-month-old infant child and he showed them his 6-month-old Aliyun Askar, and then he began to address them. He said to them, "Your enmity is with me, but what harm has this young 6-month-old done? You have already killed my brother, my companion, you have killed my sons. Grant some water to this young infant Aliyun Askar." Some of Umar ibn Saad's soldiers now began to lower their swords and lower their gazes, but nobody brought water. So Imam al-Hussein, it is said, now took Aliyun Askar. He said to them, "Maybe you think I will drink that water, so I am going to place my infant son on the burning sands of Karbala. I will place him on the sands of Karbala. Come and give the water to the child yourself." Some of the soldiers now began to shed some tears, but nobody brought water. Eventually, Imam al-Hussein said, "Oh Aliyun Askar, maybe if you show them how thirsty you are, maybe if you show them how thirsty you are, somebody will bring you some water." And so it is written, Aliyun Askar took his dry tongue out and showed them how dry his lips and tongue were. When Umar ibn Saad now saw what was happening, he got frightened. He called out, "Aina Hurmala? Where is Hurmala? Iqtal Qalam al-Hussein." Kill the words of Hussein. Hurmala was the expert archer in the army of Umar ibn Saad. It is said he took out a 3-pronged arrow. An arrow that was so big that was used to pierce the necks of camels. It was a poisonous arrow. Hurmala took the arrow out. He took aim for Aliyun Askar. Rubab and the mothers had come out of the tent and were watching. They couldn't believe what they were about to see. As Hurmala took aim, all of a sudden, from the corner of his eye, he saw the mother of the child watching. And for the first time, Hurmala's arrow fell on the ground. Umar ibn Saad said to him, "Oh Hurmala, why did you fire the arrow?" He says, "How can I fire when the mother is watching?" Umar ibn Sa'd said to Hurmala, if you do not fire the arrow, we will have you executed here on the plains of Karbala. This time Hurmala takes out the arrow without looking towards the tent of the ladies. He takes aim, he fires the arrow. Historians say as if all time had stopped. Everyone was looking where the arrow would hit. Imam al-Hussein quickly took his hand. He put in front of Ali and Oscar, but then all of a sudden he saw blood spill into the air. He looked down, he saw that arrow had pierced his arm. When he looked closer, he saw the arrow had gone through his arm and lodged itself into the soft and tender neck of Ali and Oscar. Hamid ibn Muslim says, this is the first time we saw Imam al-Hussein Mazloom. He was confused. He didn't know what to do now. We saw him trying to catch the blood of Ali ibn Asghar. What was he to do with the blood that was pouring from this infant's neck? He said, we saw Imam al-Hussein. He would take that blood as if he didn't want the earth to take that blood because the earth could not bear the blood of this innocent child. He began to take the blood of Ali ibn Asghar and he wiped it all over his face and body. And now they say this was the hardest part for Imam al-Hussein. They say all day he was taking the bodies of his shuhada from the battlefield towards the camp. But this time we saw Imam al-Hussein. He was holding this small infant child, but he could not find it within himself to go back towards the tent of the ladies, to go back to the mother of the child. He said this, we saw him 7 times. He tried to go to the tent. 7 times he came back. He was reciting Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un ridan bi qada'i wa tasliman li amri. Finally, Imam al-Hussein, he was thinking, what would he tell Rubab when he brought this infant child, this martyred infant child to his mother? As he arrived in front of Rubab, covered in the blood of Ali and Asghar, Rubab started to weep and cry. He said, Rubab, don't cry, don't cry. Remember yesterday night, you were crying. You told me that you didn't have a sacrifice to give on the day of Ashura, where Rubab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answered your dua. He accepted a sacrifice from you. Be pleased, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has accepted the sacrifice of Ali and Asghar. But this is not the end of the musibah. One last part of the musibah. Hamid ibn Muslim says, he said Imam al-Hussein and Rubab were worried at what the enemy soldiers, what you do to this young infant child. So this was the only one of the shuhada that was buried by Imam al-Hussein. He went behind the tent of the ladies. He dug a grave. He buried that young infant son of his before he did his final al-wida. But historians say on the 11th day of Muharram, the day after Ashura, Shimr called out as now they were about to depart from Karbala towards Kufa. He looked up at all the heads when they were placed on the spears, and then he called out to his enemy soldiers, isn't there one head that is missing here? The soldiers were silent, they did not speak. Shimr said, I cannot see the head of that infant child. Oh Allah, how did you protect the heart of Rubab at that moment? How did you protect her heart? Shimr said, I cannot see the head of the infant child. But the soldiers remained silent. So Shimr went towards the back of the tent. He took out his spear. He began to poke it into the sand, poking it until he saw blood began to emerge from the sands of Karbala. And he dug out the body of Ali ibn Asghar and removed his head and placed it on the spear. Ala lahnatullahi ala al-qawm al-zalimin fasayalamu alladhina zalamu ayyamun qalibin yanqalibun inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Matam Hussein, ya Hussein, ya Hussein, ya Hussein, ya Hussein, ya Hussein, ya Hussein.
شه ارض سرا فرق بشکافته شیر خدا ناله های شب تار زهرا مادر پرچم سرخ کربلا همه گوییم بیا مهدی جان همه گوییم بیا مهدی جان بشنو ناله ما مهدی جان ابا صالح ابا صالح ابا صالح یا صاحب الزمان
گئے کہاں سے غیر شام کے بڑھے سائے کھو گئے کہاں سے غیر شام کے بڑھے سائے ماں اکیلی مقتل میں ڈھونڈنے کہاں جائے کھو گئے کہاں سے غیر شام کے بڑھے سائے گود اجڑ گئی میری جل گیا تیرا جھولا گود اجڑ گئی میری جل گیا تیرا جھولا ماں کسے جھلائے ماں ہائے کس کو بہلائے کھو گئے کہاں سے غیر شام کے بڑے سائے گود اجڑ گئی میری جل گیا تیرا جھولا اب کسے جھلائے ماں ہائے کس کو بہلائے کھو گئے کہاں سے غیر شام کے بڑھے جس جگہ جلا جھولا راکھ جس جگہ بکھرے جس جگہ جلا جھولا راکھ جس جگہ بکھری ماں وہیں پہ بیٹھی ہے اپنی گود پھیلائے کھو گئے کہاں سے غیر شام کے بڑے نیند ہوگی آنکھوں میں آؤ لوریاں دے دوں نیند ہوگی آنکھوں میں آؤ لوریاں دے دوں تم نہ جب تلک سو ماں کو کیسے چین آئے کھو گئے کہاں سے غیر شام کے بڑھے ماں اسی طرح سے ہے انتظار میں تیرے ماں اسی طرح سے ہے انتظار میں تیرے سر پہ چاہے دن گزرے سر پہ چاہے رات آئے ہو گئے کہاں سے غیر شام کے بڑھے یاد ہے نوید اس کو رخصت علی کیسے چین آئے ہو گئے کہاں صغر شام کے اکیلی مقتل میں ڈھونڈنے کہاں جائے یا حسین
حسین یا 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 حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین وہ عابد بیمار تھا وہ عابد چلنے سے جو لاچار تھا چلنے سے جو اور شام کا بازار تھا اور شام کا اور مصطفیٰ کی بیٹیاں مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین شبیر کی وہ لاڈلی شبیر کی سینے پہ جو شاہ کے پلی سینے پہ جس کی ابا بن میں جلی جس کی ابا بن میں جلی منہ پر تما چونکے نشان مولا حق امام یا حسن مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین رو کر کہے قاسم کی ماں رو کر کہے قاسم کی ماں مارا گیا قاسم جوان مارا گیا اے لال میں ڈھونڈوں کہاں اے لال میں مہندی تیری صحرا تیرا مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا وہ اصغر بے شیر تھا وہ اصغر اور حرملا کا تیر تھا اور حرملا پیاسا گلا کیوں کر کٹا پیاسا گلا کیوں کر کٹا لرزی زمین اور آسمان مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین آلی اصغر آلی
آصغر بن تیرے میں چین کہاں سے پاؤں، آصغر بن تیرے میں چین کہاں سے پاؤں، آ لوٹ کے آ جا لال تیرے جی بھر کے ناز اٹھاؤں، آصغر بن تیرے میں چین کہاں سے پاؤں، آصغر بن تیرے میری آنکھ کا تارا ہے تو مجھ کو جان سے پیارا ہے، ماں دکھیاری کے جینے کا تو ہی لال سہارا ہے، تجھے چھوڑ کے تنہا مقتل میں کیسے شام کو جاؤں، آصغر بن تیرے میں چین کہاں سے پاؤں، آصغر بن تیرے میں چین کہاں سے پاؤں، تیری وہ معصوم ادائیں تیری یاد دلاتی ہے، تیرے پیار کی وہ سب باتیں مجھ کو بہت رلاتی ہے، میں تیری جدائی میں بیٹا رو رو کے مر نہ جاؤں، آصغر بن تیرے میں چین کہاں سے پاؤں، آصغر بن لوریوں والے یہ تو تیرے ناز اٹھانے کے دن تھے، آنکھوں میں تیری خوشیوں کے خواب سجانے کے دن تھے، آ لوٹ کے آ جا اصغر تو تیرا کرتا میں بدلاؤں، اصغر بن تیرے میں چین کہاں سے پاؤں، اصغر بن تیرے بھول نہیں سکتی ماں اصغر پیاسے ہوٹ تیرے بیٹا، خالی گود ہے اور زندہ ہے، آجا ماں کے پاس آجا، آنن مجاہد میں تیری اشکوں سے پیاس بجھاؤں، اصغر بن تیرے میں چین کہاں سے پاؤں، اصغر بن تیرے میں چین کہاں سے پاؤں، کتنی ہے بے چین سکینہ تیرے ناز اٹھانے کو، صبح و شام ترستی ہے وہ تیرا دل بہلانے کو، تیری لاڈلی بہن سکینہ کا میں دل کیسے بہلاؤں، اصغر بن تیرے میں چین کہاں سے پاؤں، اصغر بن تیرے میں چین کہاں سے پاؤں، یا حسین
اللهم صل على Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. As usual, the rest of the program for the Urdu house will be after Salah. So please do not leave. Thank you.
عليكم السلام هل عم شلون يا الله
تعمدي
بحق ومكانك أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر ولله الحمد. الحمد لله. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن مولانا عليا ولي الله. ولي نعم الولي والحسن علي. أشهد أن عليا وأولاده المعصومين بالحق حجج